it. So like if you choose like Game Maker Studio to make a 3D game, that's a bad choice. So it's like that. So team strengths is pretty obvious, so I'm not going to go into that again. And finally, I'd like to talk about some additional constraints here. So when constraints are like imposed in the design of a game, they're basically like a set of rules which are universal and unchangeable. So the player can find out those rules and like they can overcome them. They act as some kind of boundaries. So take an action game AI, for example. So like once the player can find out what pattern the enemy attacks in and all that, like he can overcome that. But as a programmer, you are under a lot of constraints when creating that AI. This is something that's called as imperfect AI. So as a programmer, you are making an imperfect AI and not a perfect one, because perfect AI is really easy to create. Because no matter how fast the player reacts, I can always make the AI react faster than that. So as someone said, like we are creating artificial stupidity, not artificial intelligence. So yeah, so another constraint programmers can face is like procedural generation. So the idea here is like all assets and all that, they're procedurally generated and they're not predefined. Fun only, and it was a challenge called the One Object Challenge. It was hosted in GameJolt, and the idea was you have to make a game using one object or one class only. So of course you can't make like full-scale games with one object, but it spawned a lot of interesting mini games, and all that was later compiled in a bundle and released later. So you can check that out. You can search One Object Challenge. So yeah, the next part is minimalism.
Yeah, so the next part is minimalism, and I'm pretty sure all of you know what minimalism means. It is the simple use of graphics or the simple gameplay that makes minimalism stand out. There are many famous games like Limbo and Thomas Was Alone, which have used minimalism to perfect extent. And minimalism, you can use minimalism, like I said, in gameplay. And when you have simple goals, the player gets less confused about the game. He knows what to do. And if there are simple mechanics, he won't get intimidated by the sheer number of mechanics in the game. And so he'll be able to play the game and focus on the gameplay, which is what we want to do. And in the art front, we can use limited color palettes, silhouettes, or even simple shapes and sizes to convey the minimalism in an art.
So as another example of like minimalistic gameplay, I'm going to mention Jetpack Joyride. That has only one touch gameplay, right? But it's ideal for mobile games, and they have used like minimalism in gameplay perfectly for that. So like other examples are Hubrix and Thomas Was Alone. Like they're not complex games; they're very simple games based on simple ideas, and they keep expanding on that. So. As a conclusion, let's talk about the past, the present, and the future of the industry. So, the game industry has like always flourished under heavy technical constraints. So, like take the NES for example. It's an extremely limited console by today's standards. And perfect example of what can be done by the NES is like Mario. So, in Mario, we have the same sprite for the clouds and the bushes. And that was because of the technical constraints of the NES. It was the same sprite, just with different colors. But the NES single-handedly saved the industry back in 1985. And so now Mario has evolved from this to this as it is now. And with the democratization of game development and all that, we have like less technical constraints to follow now, and we can like have more self-imposed constraints for like creating new ideas. So we don't exactly know what the future holds, but it certainly looks bright for indies specifically, because like indies are also under a lot of more constraints than bigger studios in terms of budget and all that. So that's also why I think they can take more risks. So yeah, that's about it for the talk. I hope you had something to take out of it, and you can reach us here. So thank you for listening, and any questions?
So, yeah, questions. We have 10 minutes. No one has any question? Yeah, thank you. It's always the first one, then everyone will ask. Is it because everyone needs to hear? That's why.
So you only discuss constraints concerning game jams. Any other constraints that you can share?
Yeah, like we only talked about game jams because the idea is like how we get getting constraints to like think of new ideas, right? So and mainly in game jams, if you see, there are a lot of new game ideas coming out. So that was the whole point of the talk. So in other constraints, like we mentioned budget and time and all that, but that leads to many like alternate solutions for the same problem. They don't usually like come up with new ideas. But for like team strengths, he mentioned Hubricks. That was like because of they had no artist for that team. So like they had to make that game without an artist, and hence they made with minimalism. So it's like.
Any more questions? Anyone else? Okay.
When we do game jam, participating, we make iterations of game. Means from small to we try to make it more and more better.
Yeah.
So what do you think? We can use same game mechanics in other. Is it okay? Like you shown Mario first, and then it was converted into another game. So if we use same mechanics, but every time different play style, bit of a, is it okay to
yeah,
work
like
on?
see, a lot of famous games have originated from game jams, right? They have the during the game jams they make the simple core mechanic first, and then they expand on that later. Like for example, Sergeant Simulator 2013, that was originally a game jam game. And Rami Ismail's here, so like most of his games was created during game jams. See, like Nuclear Throne and all that. So like it was like simple at first, no? So, and they expanded on that later. So yeah, we can do that.
So I just wanted to ask, after game jams, like exactly when your game is done and you have submitted, like you polished Regalia a lot after your game jam.
No,
so
that was the version we showcased was the game jam version.
So that's what I wanted to ask. After game jam, whatever product you have in your hand, do you polish it and take it on the next stage of publishing, or do you plan on keeping it whatever you have made and going on the next game jam and make new games?
Yeah, for that, we usually use the game jam to test the game and to get feedback from people. So if we get a positive response, then we will take the game forward. We're actually taking one of our games.
We're actually taking two of our games, and both of them originated in game jams. We are turning them into a full-scale game now. And like we also tried a lot of other ideas, as you saw, but they received positive response. But like we can't work on all their game at once. So, yeah.
What kind of platform do you plan on publishing the game later on?
So like Meanwhile in a Parallel Universe, that also originally started from a competition, right? We published that in mobile platforms. Like the games we are currently making now, we are targeting mainly PCs and hopefully consoles later.
We have time for one more question. Just one more. Anybody? Okay.
Hi, my name is Rituraj. Had a question about mobile games. So what kind of constraints do you think you should consider when thinking of mobile platform?
Okay, so the primary constraint for mobile platforms would be the controls. So like many games many people port PC games to mobile, and they have a virtual D-pad and all that. So I don't think virtual D-pad is a really good idea for mobile games. So like ideal mobile games should have this constraint, like you should do everything with either one finger or like double tapping and like swiping. That's all the mechanics that needs to be for the controls. And apart from that, we also have like memory constraints and all that for mobile, because there's less memory to work with, and you can't really make huge sized games for that. So, yeah.
So mainly art, budget, and game mechanic.
Yeah.
Minimum art, budget, and game mechanic.
I didn't catch you.
Minimum art, budget, and game mechanic. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you, folks. Thank you, Diptoman and Rahul. That was really, really fascinating. But we have time constraints, so we need to stop now.